Have you ever driven a manual transmission? Well, if you haven't, I really recommend it. It may seem scary at first, but it's really not that bad. A couple years ago, my sister was looking for a new car, and the only one she could afford was a manual Pontiac G3. She had no idea how to drive manual, so my dad had to show her. She was nervous and scared because she didn't want to break her car. Although I've never owned a manual before, I've learned a lot about them, and I will definitely own some in the future. Manual transmissions have many benefits that people are not aware of. First, I will talk about the price of manual transmissions and why they're so much cheaper than automatics. Second, the fuel economy and how it differs from driving an automatic. Third is the maintenance and why it's so much cheaper than maintenance on an automatic. And lastly, why I think they are so much cooler. The first is the obvious big plus about having a manual transmission, the price. Most of the time, manuals are cheaper than their automatic counterparts. From the factory, manufacturers usually sell them anywhere from around $800 to $1,000 cheaper, simply because they have fewer moving parts than automatics. And you can usually get them cheaper from dealerships because they're often really desperate to get rid of them, so you can usually negotiate a pretty good price. Manuals are also cheaper than automatics. Manuals are also cheaper to maintain than automatics. Money Under 30 states that manuals are effectively 100% mechanical, just involving a few nuts, bolts, and rods. The rest is up to your right hand and your left foot. As a result, transmission-related repairs on manuals are usually less than half the cost to similar repairs on automatics. Automatics are delicately engineered mix of computers and mechanical parts, costly to design, costly to repair. Another way they can be cheaper is because they can sometimes be cheaper to insure. Insurance companies have wildly varying views when it comes to manual transmissions. Some say because they're cheaper to replace, they should be cheaper to insure, and they say they'll be more attentive when you're driving manual. On the other hand, some companies think that you're immature if you drive manual, and they think that you'll get in a crash if you stall at an intersection. Along with making things cheaper, a manual transmission is quite a bit lighter than an automatic, because there are so many less moving parts and pieces. Being lighter helps with mostly fuel economy, because the lighter the car, the less the work the car does to move. Manual transmissions are usually only about 50 to 75 pounds lighter than an automatic, but it does make quite a bit of difference. Being lighter obviously helps with fuel economy. Some cars with manual transmission can improve gas mileage by a significant 2 to 5 miles per gallon, and can cut a car's price from anywhere to $800 to $1,200 bucks. Manual transmissions can also often improve acceleration, sometimes significantly, which is a big welcome benefit with having a smaller engine. And many drivers find that driving stick is more engaging and more fun, but we'll get into that later. Consumer Reports claims that they have bought several test cars of different types with both manual and automatic transmissions. They run them through their fuel economy and acceleration tests, and they found that the manual delivered better miles per gallon overall. But in a few cases, however, the latest automatic transmission designs, including the 6-speed automatics, actually surpass their manual counterparts. Another reason that most manuals have slightly better fuel economy is because the engine doesn't have to work as hard to shift the gears smoothly, so it doesn't consume as much fuel. New York Daily News states that parasitic power losses from the torque converter and hydraulic pump can rob an automatic equipped car of a small percentage of power along with some fuel efficiency. Depending on your driving style and road conditions, drivers can increase the fuel economy by as much as 15%. Fuel efficiency isn't the only money you'll save with a manual transmission. Maintenance is also considerably cheaper and a lot easier on a manual transmission. Manual transmissions are usually cheaper to maintain and repair than automatics because automatics are far more complex with more parts and functions that can fail. An automatic has hundreds of mechanical, hydraulic, and electronic parts that work in harmony to help your car shift smoothly. In contrast, a manual transmission is mostly mechanical gears that rely on the driver to engage the clutch and shift when needed. Cars.com says that the cost of replacing automatic transmission fluid ranges anywhere from about $100 to $200 bucks depending on the make of your car and who's doing the repair. Manual transmissions also require periodic fluid changes, but they don't need to be done as often, and they're usually less than half the cost than that of automatics. If you burn through clutches rapidly because of your driving style, you could end up paying more for a manual transmission than you would with an automatic. Likewise, if your foot-hand coordination isn't great, you can frequently grind gears and chip gear teeth with a manual, and that will take a toll over time. Along with being cheaper to maintain, their manuals are also much easier to maintain than automatics. While transmission fluid doesn't need replacement as rapidly as motor oil, it's still something that impacts the way your car moves and drives. Transmission fluid may need to be replaced every 15,000 miles or so. Cost and maintenance aren't the only reason manual transmissions are better. They're overall just cooler than automatics. Just owning a manual transmission keeps you more in touch with your car, meaning you'll be more up to date on maintenance that your car needs, not just the transmission. While driving a manual, since you have to pay attention to RPMs and you need to know when to shift, it keeps you more engaged while driving and gives you overall a better experience. While the majority of vehicles on the road today are automatic, there are many benefits with learning how to drive stick that don't deal with money. Most cars and trucks on the market today are automatics. The EPA's statistic record of manual vehicles reaches its peak in the 1980s at around 30%. Falling since then to under 5% of the total market, automatic transmissions now make up the vast majority of cars, trucks, and high-end vehicles around the world, even though manual models are still available. DriverZed.com states that as a manual driver, you will learn to pay more attention to road conditions, vehicle speeds, and the road grade. This carries well into automatic driving because it makes you a better driver. The fact of the matter is, more is involved with driving a manual. It's a nice skill to have with driving classic cars, towing heavy loads, or driving high-end vehicles. You'll never know when you need the skill. Even if few cars in the U.S. are manual anymore, there are still stick-shift vehicles on the road. Drivers who know how to maneuver sticks are able to drive the vast majority of cars, trucks, and high-end vehicles. Cars have a lot of moving parts, gears, and electronics. You can learn how a car works just by driving stick shift, since you are essentially controlling your vehicle shifting manually instead of relying on your car to do it for you. Driving stick gives you a chance to experience this firsthand and understand why automatics were developed. Few people can drive manual vehicles in the U.S. U.S. News and World Report says that as few as 18% of Americans can actually drive a manual vehicle. So you can join the just under 1/5 of Americans that actually know what it takes to drive stick. As you can see, there are many reasons why you should switch to manual. I've told you about how much time, money, and effort you can save by doing it. Now that you understand the benefits of owning and driving a manual, I want you to think about buying one and what good it would do for you. And if you think it's worth it, go out and buy one, because I have a feeling that you'll like it.